Before we get started, if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Now let's dive into recap. Duke Greg Harris had just scolded his useless daughter, Jessica, who had once again squandered millions on unprofitable business ventures. The main character, Sophia, who, for unknown reasons, had suddenly found herself in the body of a young aristocrat from the book she had been reading, completely agreed with the accusations made by the girl's father. The amount of money spent was hundreds of times greater than the average annual income of an ordinary family in the country. Undoubtedly, Duchess Charlotte Harris, Jessica's stepmother and nemesis, all rolled into one, had played a major role in her stepdaughter's bankruptcy. The head of the family hated his daughter so much that he paid no attention to any mitigating circumstances. Now, he had decided to punish her by driving her out of his estate. The main character received a small sum of money as a gift, which should have been enough for her to get by for the time being. Jessica, without further ado, agreed to leave the house where, after the death of her mother, the Marchioness of Gordon, she had been hated by almost everyone. The Duke was somewhat surprised by the girl's calm behavior. Jessica, who had been quite spoiled and prone to scandal, now quietly agreed to leave her father's mansion. Harris screamed that he would never let his unloved child return. As she left, the main character felt relieved to have the opportunity to escape the estate. Jessica said goodbye to her father with a smile, promising never to return. She went into her room and packed the necessary belongings. It was urgent that she leave before her stepmother could seize the money she had received from the head of the family. The only person upset by Jessica's departure was her personal maid, Agatha, who had always treated her kindly. The maid didn't understand where the poor girl would go and assumed her mistress would head to the neighboring duchy to see her fiancé. In the novel that Sophia had recently become interested in, Jessica's dream had been the handsome Franklin Smith. However, the young aristocrat told Agatha that she had a different wish to fulfill now. The cold-blooded Duke no longer interested her. The new Jessica was no longer concerned with the crowds of admirers who had chased her inheritance without valuing real feelings. She had decided to change her life, one that had not been very happy in its original version. The fantasy novel had little meaningful content. It was filled with love, betrayal, intrigue, and the plots of rich, handsome men from the aristocracy. Duke Frank Smith was the heir to a famous family and dreamed of increasing his capital. He was the main character of the book. The second was the beautiful and charming Grace Harris, Jessica's younger half-sister. The novel described a story of forbidden love and complicated relationships among the nobility. According to the book, Grace was Franklin's fiancée. It was supposed to be a marriage of convenience, but she had fallen in love with her future husband and didn't want to share him with anyone. Ultimately, burning with jealousy toward her sister, Jessica would try to kill her, and for that, she would be beheaded. At first, not believing she was in another body, the main character had tried to return to her own world, but all attempts failed. After calming down a bit, Sophia decided to act. She needed to change the fate of her original character. After much thought, she discovered her true dream. In her past life, a little girl had loved a store that sold stationery and other interesting items for children. Most of all, she had loved the lollipops with different flavors, chewing candies, and other sweets. So now, the new Jessica reassured her maid that she wanted to start her own business, to give children a little piece of happiness. Agatha knew that all of her mistress's previous attempts to open stores and invest in business ideas had failed. The maid adamantly refused to let her beloved mistress go. She knew nothing about the stationery store and believed the new venture would quickly drown in the vast sea of failed businesses. Knowing the young aristocrat as she did, Agatha didn't believe she could succeed. She tried to scare her by saying she would lose all her money and wouldn't be able to dress well or eat delicious food anymore. Jessica comforted her loyal maid, who was deeply worried about her. Agatha laughed, saying the beauty would have to eat common people's food. The main character smiled and replied that she loved oatmeal and rye bread. As they parted, Jessica promised to take her assistant back once things improved. The maid reminded her that the evil stepmother would not let her live in peace. Agatha was the only one who knew that Charlotte constantly humiliated and tormented her adopted daughter. The main character returned briefly to calm her maid down. She had already thought about what to do next. It's time to settle accounts with my stepmother, for my childhood tears and the constant insults, she thought. A new life was ahead, and it was time to act. As she left her room, Jessica saw the numerous servants who had gathered to see off the hated young mistress. The main character quickly tried to leave the house, where she knew she was in real danger. Everyone around believed the bloodline of the Gordon Marchionesses was cursed by dragons. Nearly all members of the ancient and powerful family had died young, just like Jessica's mother. Still, the main character hoped it was just a legend. Instead of protecting the girl, her father and stepmother had only ever hated her. People began to blame Jessica for various incidents, holding her responsible for all the troubles and problems. A carriage soon arrived to take the girl and her belongings to her new place of residence. The main character effortlessly climbed into the carriage. None of the servants even offered to help her carry the heavy suitcases. The workers, frightened by the rumors, hoped they had finally rid themselves of the cursed young lady for good. Jessica knew exactly how much she was hated in that house, and she was glad that her father had made the decision to expel her. She was happy to leave the place where she had been constantly humiliated since childhood. She knew she could handle things on her own and live in peace. The coachman was surprised when he heard the aristocrat's request to be taken to the slums. Left alone, the main character began to make further plans. She knew that her stepmother dreamed of marrying off her daughter, Grace, to Duke Franklin in order to strengthen both families' power and increase their wealth. Jessica suspected that the evil Charlotte would now try to destroy her completely. She had always done cruel things and constantly gossiped with her husband, trying to turn him against his own child. To protect herself, the main character decided to find an ally from the novel, someone she knew could help her. She asked the coachman to stop the carriage near the ancient cemetery. This place was believed to be haunted. The coachman was startled by the young lady's request and feared for her safety. But the beauty reassured the man, thinking that, in some sense, she herself was like a ghost, so she had nothing to fear. After receiving payment, the young man wished her good luck and quickly left the eerie place. From the book, the beauty knew exactly who could become her knight. Jessica boldly ventured deep into the abandoned cemetery, a place long avoided due to ominous rumors. The story of his heroic deeds spread across the entire continent. Unfortunately, the warrior was doomed to spend eternity inside the weapon, sealed away with the demons, waiting for someone to break the curse and free him. However, no one had been able to do so all this time. He remained among the ancient graves. According to the book, one day the sword would be found by young Duke Franklin, who would release the powerful knight, become famous, and secretly plot to take the imperial throne. After reading the story, the main character understood how significant the warrior was and decided to seek his help for herself. Jessica managed to free the protector without much difficulty. The black-haired youth with sapphire eyes was strikingly handsome. It was indeed Armando, who had saved the empire from demons at the age of 17. The girl was thrilled to have completed the task and handed the sword back to the warrior. The young man looked at the stranger in confusion, unsure of where he was or what was happening. He asked the young beauty to introduce herself. The main character explained who she was and why she had summoned him, asking him to sign a contract with her. Armando was disheartened, believing Jessica only wanted to use him to fulfill her own selfish desires. The girl did not deny that she wanted the knight's protection and support for her business. The warrior was surprised at how calmly the beauty accepted his accusations and asked her to explain her plans. His decision to sign the contract would depend on her intentions. The main character simply asked for protection. She was not interested in power or the throne. Armando was once again surprised. Until now, everyone who had tried to form a contract with him wanted to conquer entire continents or seize kingdoms. Jessica said she just wanted to live a quiet life and open a stationery store in the capital to serve children. The girl had to spend some time convincing the knight that this was not some metaphorical name for an empire, but a simple shop for special goods aimed at young customers. The beauty assured him that there was nothing complicated about her proposal, and that after fulfilling the terms of the contract, he would be able to return to human life and finally leave the sword forever. Armando considered it. The task truly seemed simple. At last, the mighty knight made his decision and extended his hand to the girl. An agreement was formed between the warrior and his contractor, the future owner of a stationery shop. Using teleportation, the two partners arrived in the capital, on a street where one of the best educational institutions in the empire was located. Its gates sparkled with gold, and the grand facade was magnificent. The knight admired the beautiful building, believing it worthy of him. But Jessica quickly disappointed the awestruck warrior. She pointed to the house where they were to live and work together. The girl laughed when she saw Armando's stunned expression. He was utterly shocked by the sight of the actual building. Jessica's mother had died young, leaving her husband with a small daughter. The title of Marchioness of Gordon passed to the imperial family, and numerous movable and immovable properties went to Jessica's father, Duke Greg Harris. Upon her death, the Marchioness had left a small gift to her only child, a modest house in the center of the capital. The main character had not returned to that house since her mother's death, and she hadn't expected to find it in such a deplorable state. However, the girl was not discouraged. After renovation and cleaning, the house would be ideal for her dream. The store itself would be located on the first floor, and the living quarters would be on the second. Armando felt cheated. He didn't want to sleep in a dilapidated shack. Jessica calmed the knight down by telling him about her plans. The main character was determined to become the owner of a stationery store that would become famous throughout the world. The young warrior didn't believe the lady's words. He knew all swindlers behaved the same way and dreamed of glory. But Jessica promised that once the business became successful, she would be able to pay him for his work. Jessica looked tenderly at the formidable knight, whom she, for some reason, considered like a younger brother. After all, she had never truly had a family of her own. The inside of the house turned out to be even worse than it looked from the outside. The premises were in terrible condition. Cobwebs hung everywhere, and rats scurried across the floors. Although the house clearly needed a full renovation, the main character still felt like its rightful owner. Jessica was determined, unlike her assistant. Armando could not understand the girl's joy and was ready to break the contract. Meanwhile, the main character was already thinking about where to place the counters and various displays. She dreamed that her plans would soon come true and that children would become regular guests in this house. Jessica smiled happily, imagining the laughter and joy of the little ones. The knight looked at the girl, inspired by her dreams, and agreed to help her. After cleaning, the future store owner wanted to create a large, beautiful sign to attract the attention of passers-by. As she reflected on her plans, the main character remembered her past life. She had been an orphan, raised in a special institution. Jessica believed she had grown into a good person thanks to the support of those around her, especially the caregivers and teachers who had guided her. The most important influence was the director of the shelter, who helped the children stay on the right path. What Jessica loved most back then was a small shop nearby that, in addition to selling stationery, also offered various costumes. The kind shopkeeper always treated her to something unusual and tasty, like a tongue-coloring lollipop. These bright childhood memories became the foundation of Jessica's current dream. She wanted everyone who visited her store to leave feeling happy. To speed up the cleaning, Armando had to use his magic of cleanliness. While they worked, morning arrived without notice, and it was time to head to the Imperial Palace. Armando still didn't have an official status, so he accompanied his partner in the form of a sword. The streets were quiet, and Jessica felt optimistic until a familiar voice instantly shattered her cheerful mood. Standing before her were the main character of the novel and her fiancé. Jessica greeted Franklin Smith reluctantly. The Duke was indeed handsome, as expected of the male lead in a book. The young man was displeased to learn that his fiancée had left the family estate. He was especially unhappy that she was now living in an unknown place and, in his view, leading a dissolute lifestyle. He ordered her to return home within a month, reminding her of their upcoming wedding. Jessica was saddened by the encounter. She had no intention of marrying Franklin again. She remembered how, in the beginning of their acquaintance, the young Duke had courted her with kindness. He was considerate and gentle, unlike everyone else, who feared the dragon's curse and despised Jessica. For the girl who had been rejected by everyone, the gallant gentleman had seemed like the only safe harbor. The Duke had easily won the heart of the unfortunate, lonely girl. But after Jessica fell in love with him, his attitude changed dramatically. Franklin began to constantly criticize her and find fault in everything she did, developing in her a deep sense of inferiority and self-doubt. Eventually, he started comparing his bride to her younger sister, claiming Grace was more intelligent, beautiful, and capable. Things got even worse when the groom began secretly dating Jessica's relative, cheating on his future wife. Franklin openly expressed his feelings for the Harris family's youngest daughter. Those around them began to suspect the true nature of the relationship between the young Duke and Grace. Of course, both Grace and Duke Smith denied any romantic involvement, pretending that they were only meeting for business. Jessica repeatedly asked her fiancé how he felt about her half-sister, as she constantly heard rumors of infidelity. In response to her concerns, the future husband reproached the girl for not paying enough attention to him. Franklin skillfully manipulated his bride, speaking about their upcoming wedding in such a way that the enamored beauty, without even noticing it, sank to the bottom of despair. Jessica gradually lost her sense of self-worth and stopped thinking about herself. Those around her despised and hated the poor girl. The main character looked at the narcissistic Duke, who had recently continued to ignore her and spent all his free time with her sister, and once again reminded him of their secret affair. Grace was currently vacationing in the distant Holy Lands, but Franklin continued to communicate with her constantly. Jessica told him directly that she knew about the relationship with her sister and refused to go through with the wedding. Surprisingly, the real Jessica had once been so in love with the Duke and had valued herself so little that she didn't want to believe the gossip. But now, the main character openly accused her fiancé of cheating. Franklin could not understand what had happened to his bride. The former Jessica would never have had the strength to break off an engagement. She had always listened to her future husband without complaint. She had been so infatuated with the Duke that she stopped noticing everything around her and had become blind to his flaws. But now, the girl refused to listen to any more excuses. Jessica firmly announced her decision to call off the wedding. She believed that betrayal could never be forgiven and even suggested that her ex-fiancé marry Grace instead. That way, an alliance would still be formed between the two prestigious duchies. But Franklin insisted that he would only marry Jessica, despite the fact that her sister was more beautiful, elegant, and sweet. Jessica could not understand why Smith was still determined to marry her. The main character repeated herself. She was truly ending the engagement. Jessica even jokingly suggested that Franklin marry Madame Harris instead of Grace, saying that despite the age difference, they would make a wonderful couple. To underscore her resolve, she drew her sword and drove it into the ground in front of the surprised Duke. Normally, this gesture would signify a challenge to a duel, but in this case, the beauty was simply confirming her firm decision to end their relationship. She demanded an official document verifying the separation as soon as possible. After saying everything she had to say, Jessica said goodbye and turned to leave. Franklin was stunned. He had not expected such bold action from his once timid bride. He assumed she was just trying to attract attention. Jessica had always obeyed him without question. He had chosen her outfits, their travel destinations, and even made business decisions for her. The Duke watched her walk away and thought that she couldn't have changed so drastically. As if sensing his gaze, Jessica looked back. The young man was delighted. He believed he had trained the beauty too well and assumed she would soon come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But Jessica approached him once more. She wanted to tell him that she knew he had called her a brainless doll. Franklin didn't know how to respond. The main character continued to list the phrases the Duke often said about her behind her back. He shuddered, feeling as though she was reading his mind. Jessica declared that all the talk about her being completely controlled by her fiancé was a complete misconception. Franklin was furious. He suspected the beauty had found herself another man. The young man insisted that no one else could love her. The main character remained calm. She said she was ready to marry anyone, just not Smith, and pointed at a random stranger walking past them to prove her point. As a final farewell, she asked her former fiancé to disappear from her life forever. After calling Franklin a bastard,